Hello and welcome to season 2, episode 11 of Para New Orleans, the Paranormal New Orleans podcast, where we tell tales of the strange, the spooky, the paranormal, the unexplained, and otherworldly from across the New Orleans area, Louisiana, and beyond. I am your hostess, Fat Girl Freestyle. We have one more episode remaining for this season, and then we'll be on hiatus until spooky season. Today's tale comes from a subscriber to our YouTube channel, the Fat Girl Freestyle channel, and they want to remain anonymous. So, as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Para New Orleans. People warn you about going into graveyards. People tell you don't play with the spirits of the dead. And when you're young, you don't take heed as you should. This happened about 20 years ago. I was much younger, foolish, hanging out with my friends. We thought it would be a great idea to go to the cemetery late one night, play a game of hide and seek, check out some old graves, you know, typical stuff. But little did we know that that night would change our lives. This cemetery was located in a small town in Texas. And please don't name the town. I need this story to remain anonymous because this is an experience that affected us for many years afterwards. It was a small town, and you know how small towns typically are. There's not much to do, not much to see, especially when you're an anxious teenager looking to get into something. And that something is usually trouble. So there was a rumor about this particular cemetery that it was very active with paranormal activity. Now, it's set off the road, almost in a completely wooded area. There was a small parking lot that you could pull into and walk around the cemetery. There were maybe 150 marked graves, but the unmarked ones we're not even sure. There was just this one particular part of the cemetery that was maintained by the county because it was the newer part of the cemetery. It was less than 120 years old. So there were all of these rumors about this place. And one Saturday night, my friends and I were hanging out in the parking lot of the local grocery store, just sitting on our cars, laughing, joking, just talking about all kinds of things. I remember the moon was full because the night was bright. It was absolutely beautiful. And my friend, I'll call her Sheila, suggested that we do something else. That it was getting boring just sitting in the grocery store parking lot, seeing the same old people move about. We asked, what were you interested in doing? Now, let me preface by saying Sheila was definitely the daredevil of the group. She was definitely the one that pushed limits for herself and encouraged others to do so. She suggested that we pay a visit to the old cemetery. Let's go play an interesting game of hide and seek, she said. Sitting here writing this to you, I'm wondering why none of us spoke up and said it wasn't a good idea. The energy changed among us as soon as she said the old cemetery because we all knew which one she was talking about. But none of us spoke up. We just kind of all smiled and nodded and said, let's go. But I could tell that a few of us were nervous. This was a place that our parents had warned us about. This cemetery had had a reputation for being haunted for many, many years. So we grew up hearing different stories of other people's experiences. So the idea of it being a place where you would encounter a spirit, well, it wasn't strange, but we went along with it. I really wish we hadn't. So we hop into our cars and we caravan to the cemetery, which was maybe a 15-minute drive from where we were. I sat in the car, very quiet, and my friend Richard, who I was riding with, asked me if I was okay. I told him I had a strange feeling about this entire experience, and I didn't think it was a good idea for us to go. Maybe we needed to turn around. I could tell everybody I wasn't feeling well. And he just chuckled a little bit, shook his head, and said, nah, we'll be fine. We won't be out here long. I just shrugged my shoulders and continued to look out the window, getting an ever increasing sense of dread the closer we got to the cemetery. Finally, we pull into the parking lot. And everyone just kind of takes a moment to sit in the cars. And we're just looking at each other through the windows, trying to decide who's going to have the courage to hop out first. The air was different. And when I say different, I mean thick, heavy, almost like you were trying to breathe through a mask that only had two holes for your nostrils. You wanted to forcefully take in air into your lungs, but you were restricted in doing so. So you were on the verge of panicking. That's how it felt. I was hoping that someone would say, let's go home, or let's go back to the parking lot by the grocery store. And just as I was building up my courage to speak up, Sheila hopped out of the car that she was in, telling everyone enthusiastically, come on, y'all. Let's take a look around. And she walked straight into the cemetery. Richard and I took a collective panicked inhale. I'm not sure what we were expecting to happen, but you certainly felt something lingering. Richard gave me a glance, and all of a sudden he looked like he was on the verge of panic. I heard him take a hard swallow and nervously tell me, come on, let's go. I promise you it'll be fine. My hand was shaking as I opened the car door. I stepped out into the night air and I instantly broke out into a sweat. There was an electric tingle all over my body. My feet were planted in place as my friends called to me, urging me to come along. I was barely able to move. But I didn't want to be the odd one out. I didn't want to be the lame one. So I ignored the fist that was balling up tightly in my stomach. And I moved forward towards the cemetery. I remember there was a little archway with the name of the cemetery and the date that it was founded. And once I walked through that archway, I felt as though I was in another time. No. Another time is not the right word. Another dimension. Because the air, the energy, the atmosphere, the sound, even the light from the moon was different. It was all muted. muffled. And I could hear my friends talking and laughing, but for me, it sounded like I had cotton stuffed in my ears. I wanted to turn around and run. And I urge anyone who is hearing this, if you are ever in a situation where your body is trying to tell you to escape, get away, this is not a good idea, don't ignore it. Listen to that. And do not let anyone convince you to dismiss it. Everyone's moving around, looking at headstones, tiptoeing amongst the graves, laughing. Me, I barely moved. Sheila, I caught a glimpse of her way at the back of the cemetery, and I had to wonder, how did she even get back there so fast? And she calls to us, and she's waving her arms in the air, gesturing for us to come and see something. So we make our way to where she is, and she's looking down at a particular grave. The headstone had cracked in half, and the grave itself had sunken in. And the mud and grass had split down the middle, almost as though someone had taken a knife and precisely cut it so that you could look down into the deep, dark hole beneath. We all gathered around and just stared down into that space. And I don't know about anyone else, but I could smell this dank, heavy, mildewy odor emitting from the grave. I took a step back because I was afraid that, I don't know, and it sounds crazy, but I took a step back because I felt as though something was watching me from beneath the depths. And that's when I noticed Sheila laughing, but there was no sound, or at least I couldn't hear her. But her head was thrown back, mouth open, laughing, and she was knocking on the headstone. Knocking as though she wanted to be let in. Now, if you know anything about cemeteries, you know something you do not do is knock on a headstone. because something almost always ends up knocking back. I wanted to scream. And finally, I could hear again. And as she's knocking, she's mockingly saying, "Hello, is someone there? Hello, is anyone home?" And everyone else is laughing with her, except for me and except for Richard. He was standing close to me, so he reached out and touched my hand. He turned and he looked at me and he said, "Do you feel that?" And as soon as he said it, I started to feel it. It was a deepening cold that was coming upon us. I was getting chill bumps up and down my arms. Even as I write this, I can feel the sensation. It wasn't just a cold of a temperature change, it was a cold of something unseen, pulling the elements out of the air in order to manifest itself. Sheila was still knocking and laughing. Finally, one of our other friends grabbed her hand, pulled her back, and told her to please stop. She was being disrespectful. Something wasn't right. Feeling was off. Sheila yanked her hand back, called us all a bunch of weirdos. She said, "The dead can't harm you. They're dead." And just then, we heard a steady knocking from nowhere and everywhere. And the air stopped. And we stopped. And we looked around because we were the only ones there, the only living ones, anyway. And then Sheila started shaking, not shaking, vibrating. And I know that sounds weird, but it's like the ground was vibrating beneath her feet and forcing the vibration up and through her body. And her eyes got wide, and she looked at us And she opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And we all just stared. And suddenly there was this rise of laughter from the darkness of that open grave. For some reason, I began to cry. I was so frightened. I started to cry. I felt that laughter. And it made my soul cold. And I felt a hand touch my hand. And I grabbed it, and it was ice, cold and stiff. And I felt the fingers clench my fingers. And I said, oh my goodness, Richard, poor Richard is so frightened. And I turned and I looked at him, and both of his hands were in his pocket. And I tried to release whatever phantom hand was holding mine. I couldn't. It had a tight grasp. And I tried to scream. Nothing would come out. And it started to squeeze my hand so tight. My own fingernails were painfully digging into the palm of my hand. And I noticed Sheila again. She had turned completely pale white, as if all of the blood had been drained from her body. And all of a sudden, she took off running, just running. And she shot straight into the darkness of the woods. And we tried to scream her name. We tried to yell. We tried to do anything, but none of us could talk. We couldn't scream. None of us could move. And we're all looking at each other wide-eyed in fright. And there was that laughter again. And then something leaned over my shoulder and whispered in my ear, knock, knock. And I'm a little embarrassed to say this part. But it scared me so much. I pissed myself. We could hear, finally, Sheila screaming in the distance. But it was like she was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And that laughter began to rise up into the air. And it hovered over us like a cloud. That's the best way I can describe it. And finally, I was able to yell, "Let's get the hell out of here." And I started moving backwards. And my friends started moving too. And all of us started yelling for Sheila, Sheila, Sheila. Let's go, let's go, let's go. But there was nothing. It's like she'd gone quiet. And then Richard yelled, "Ah!" And he fell over, grabbing his side as though he had been shot. He was wincing and screaming in pain, asking for one of us to help him up. We grabbed him, pulled him to his feet, and ran back through the entrance of the cemetery where the light and the air and the sound just came whooshing back. Richard still holding his side. We're looking around for Sheila. I turned and I asked Richard, had he been shot? Had he been stabbed? Was he bleeding? What happened? He lifted his shirt. There was a light dripping of blood from a scratch so deep you could see the meatiness of the tissue beneath the skin. We looked around, continuing to call Sheila's name, and there was nothing. Nothing but silence. We asked each other, should we wait? Should we go and get help? And suddenly, we heard a voice yell from just beyond the entrance of the cemetery. Get out! And that was all we needed. We hopped in our vehicles and we pulled off. We went straight to the police station. And we reported our friend Sheila missing. The police went to the old cemetery with their brightest flashlights. We went back with them to give them an exact location of where she'd been seen last. They searched for hours. Couldn't find her. They searched until the sun came up. There was no trace of her. Until the next day, her body was found floating in a river 10 miles away. There was no explanation for how she'd even gotten there. There was so much wooded area, so much rough terrain to cross from where we were to get to the river. We were questioned incessantly because they thought we'd done something to her. Not only did we lose our friend, but when she was found, her face was frozen in a horrified scream. It was so bad. They had to have a closed casket funeral. Still to this day, her death is a mystery to everyone else. But those of us who were in the cemetery that night, it is not a mystery to us. We know that those spirits in that cemetery made an example out of Sheila. Her disregard and disrespect cost her her life. It gave the rest of us nightmares for many years afterwards. My friend Richard was never the same after that experience. He was forever changed. He dropped out of school. He became an alcoholic and a drug addict. Every now and again, I would see him when I visited, and he would always talk about that night at the cemetery. always talk about the mysterious way Sheila disappeared. He would always talk about the nightmares that he had. That voice that came from that grave haunted him until he eventually died. I know this story might sound odd or like it's something from a book, but I lived it, I was witness to it, and something I never told Richard, something I've never told anyone. For many years after, I would hear that voice at random times whisper in my ear, knock, knock. Sometimes in my sleep, I would feel that phantom hand squeezing my fingers. Eventually, it all went away. But you never get the sound of that voice or the touch, those cold, dead fingers. I can only hope that the rest of my former friends eventually found peace. We all ended up losing touch shortly after Sheila's services. I think everyone left town as soon as they could. We all wanted to leave that horrifying experience behind us. To this very day, I don't go into cemeteries. I don't even like to drive past them. The last time I did was when my aunt passed away a few years back. I sat in my car while my family held a graveside service. I could have sworn, I don't know, maybe it's just my imagination. Maybe it's lingering fear. I don't know. I'm not even sure if it was real. But I could have sworn, I heard someone tapping on my window, whispering, knock, knock. Please, anyone who hears this story, take heed. Don't go playing around in cemeteries. And definitely do not knock on a headstone, because you just never know what's going to knock back. Thank you, Anonymous, for your submission. Please, everyone listening, take heed. Cemeteries are a place to be respected. It is the final resting space for many souls. Sometimes they rest in peace, and sometimes they don't. Do not take it upon yourself to go and disturb them. I always tell people, when you enter a cemetery, before you cross that threshold, you ask for permission to enter their space. You let them know you are there to observe, not to disturb, and not to do any harm. You ask them if it is okay for you to enter. It's always helpful to make an offering when you go. Normally, an eggplant will do. But if you don't have access to an eggplant, some other offering, something sweet, would work. And once you go in, of course, you maintain that respect. You do not touch anything. You do not disturb anything. And when you're on your way out, toss 9 pennies over your shoulder with your back to the cemetery. Tell the spirits, thank you for allowing you to peacefully visit their space. This way, you are ensuring that nothing decides to attach to you and follow you home. I am a frequent visitor of cemeteries because I find them to be incredibly beautiful, peaceful spaces. So this has been my practice for many years, to make an offering when I go, request their permission to enter, make an offering when I leave, and give my thanks. I want to thank Anonymous for submitting this story. I want to thank you for listening. I appreciate the engagement in the comments. Please be sure you are sharing these episodes and encouraging others to listen and share as well. Make sure you are subscribed to the Fat Girl Freestyle channel on YouTube. And of course, if you would like to support, sharing episodes always helps. But if you would like to make a monetary donation, I am Fat Girl Freestyle on Venmo and Chime. Zelle and Apple Pay is fatgirlfreestyle@gmail.com. Again, I appreciate you for listening. Also, make sure you are following Fat Girl Freestyle on Instagram. And as always, I am your hostess, Fat Girl Freestyle. This is season 2, episode 11 of Paranorleans, the Paranormal New Orleans podcast. We have one more episode to go before we are on hiatus until spooky season. Thank you for listening. And as always,